Cape Townians are being warned another El Nino is heading their way. The Weather Service is predicting a drought starting this spring. The city says its dams are back up to 60%, but is that enough? And is the city prepared? To speak about this, we have the City of Cape Town's Ian Neilson and Water Shortage South Africa's Anthony Turton. Welcome to both of you. Good to have you with us. Ian Neilson, what is Cape Town preparing for? How severe is the El Nino potentially heading its way?
Well, certainly at this point, we're in a comfortable position. Dams are sitting at 60%. That is enough water to get us through the next summer. The whole question is really just how much restrictions we need to have. If we were to repeat the level of restriction we had this past year, we can easily get through the next two summers. But obviously we have to look beyond that. We have to look to the medium to long term, and that requires us to proceed with further water augmentation schemes to ensure that as demand grows in the city, as the city booms, then we must be able to cope and provide water at the levels that people expect.
Anthony Turton, what are we expecting? What are you looking for weather-wise now?
Well, we know that El Nino is a significant event. A study that was funded by the Water Research Commission, published in about 2015, around about then, looked at the rainfall patterns in South Africa from 1950 to the present. And what is amazing is that 1982 was this pivotal year. Before 1982, from 1950 to 1982, we had a wetter than average period. From 1982 until present, we've had a drier than average period. But what's more significant is that the winter rainfall areas have been particularly affected. So I think we can reasonably safely assume that this El Nino event is going to continue to impact our weather in South Africa. It's in all likelihood going to have more extreme impacts because that's what we're seeing at global levels. I'll be in Melbourne, Australia next month. They've got a similar crisis there that they're busy working out strategies at the moment. And bottom line is that all of the winter rainfall areas of the world are currently in severe distress, California being but one of them.
I know, I mean, it doesn't help, does it, knowing that other parts of the world are also suffering. I'm just wondering what you learn from those countries going through it. I mean, is there anybody who's doing it better than us?
Well, there are many lessons to be learned from this. That's why I'll be in Australia, in fact, sharing ideas. One of the very important lessons is that we have to accept that we've reached the limit of our fresh water availability. So a strategic decision that has to now be made by leadership, that's a leadership question, is are they going to decouple their economies from the vagaries and variability of nature, yes or no? If they decouple their economies, a study was done by the World Bank some time ago that looked at this whole notion of coupling versus decoupling. And all of the economies that were still coupled to the vagaries of nature underperform. And those economies that have decoupled start excelling. So that's a decision we're going to have to make. And central to that is going to be the creation of new water. New water. We've gone as far as we can on the currently available water resources. But the beautiful thing about this narrative is that water is a flux that moves in time and space. Therefore, it's an infinitely renewable resource. We're thinking of it and treating it as a stock, as if it was a finite resource. Once we've got that simple thing in our mind, once we've got that sorted out, once leadership has accepted that this is the new reality now, we're actually in a very, very good news space after that.
Okay, Ian Neilson, what do you make about the comments of leadership and where we are in South Africa as far as dealing with the vagaries of nature is concerned?
Well, I think it's very clear now, what this last drought has taught us is that rainfall variation is much greater than what we have seen in the past. We are not ready to project that to the future, but I think the lesson to be learned is that we must diversify our water supply systems. I think Anthony's quite correct. We cannot only rely in the future on surface water supply. We have to get a greater mix of other supplies that are not always immediately affected by drought. So, but there's no silver bullet on this. We have to look at a mix of opportunities. And the good thing is that we do have opportunities that we can pursue. So
And what are those opportunities?
Desalination, water reuse. Well, as I'm saying, groundwater, desalination, water reuse are the primary ones. Those are the ones that we must pursue. We must do that in a progressive manner. These things are not built overnight. They take some years to put into place and to get right. They can be quite expensive. So we are proceeding with a review. We've already put in place a new water plan. We continue to review that to ensure that we keep it correct and the most optimal for the future. So we are already busy with groundwater studies. Well, in fact, implementation. We have some temporary desalination plants, but we have to also build over the next number of years a permanent desalination plant. We've gone and looked at the Australian examples, and there's some good ones and there's some very bad ones in Australia too. So we've looked, for example, at Perth. We believe they've managed to deal with desalination in a proper way. They've built it on the basis of going in at a moderate level and then adding to that, unlike some other cities that went in and built what they call drought busters and have not ever switched on those desalination plants. So I think there are certain lessons to be learned on how one must proceed on these matters. And we are looking to ensure that we move forward with a greater variation in our supply system, but also that it's affordable and can be implemented in a way that people can continue still to afford water supply.
I mean, Anthony, that's a problem, isn't it, with desalination plants? I mean, they are expensive, aren't they? And
compared to what? Compared to massive unemployment? I was in a meeting yesterday with some major investors, major property owners. They talk about the fact that the Cape Town property bubble has burst. Talk about the fact that people own bonds in Cape Town now of greater value than what the actual going price of the land is. So when we talk about this irresponsibly, compared to what? Compared to what? There's also this narrative that says, that tells us incorrectly that the Australians made a mistake. They built too much capacity, now they're taking capacity offline. That's why I'm going there next month to go and have a look.
But you'd rather be in that situation, wouldn't you?
Well, it's not true. It's not true, you see. If they made such a mistake, why is Perth currently considering its third plant? Right. So if number 1 and 2 is such a failure, why would they be going for number 3? See, we've got to have an honest conversation.
So are you a fan of desalination? Are you a fan of looking for...
I'm not a fan of any of these things. I just believe that we have to understand that we've reached the fundamental limit. We reached that in 2002. In 2002, South Africa became a water-constrained economy, and in 2015, we became a capital-constrained economy because of the war against white monopoly capital. So those are the two realities. We don't have money, we don't have water. So if we're going to get serious about this now, we're going to have to start creating new water, and new water doesn't only come from desalination.
Are you blaming this on PE?
Well, we're looking at specifically your low-hanging fruit is your recovery of water from waste. It's much cheaper than desalination. We currently produce 5 billion litres a day of sewage in the country. 5 billion litres. 4.2 billion litres of that is simply discharged into our rivers.
And so when you were talking about white capitalism, were you saying that BEE is possibly at fault here? What?
No. Just the whole thing about that, you know, the Bell Pottinger thing, etc. That has now caused a net outflow of capital. We've currently have minus 25% FDI in South Africa. So South Africans have taken their money offshore, foreigners have withdrawn their money. So we're a capital-constrained economy since 2015.
Okay, and let me put that to Ian Nelson. I mean, how big a role did politics play in the water shortage situation in Cape Town, considering Cape Town wasn't getting the money that it needed? Or even the water?
Well, certainly we are not happy with the expenditure we're not happy with the expenditure the national government has made, that they have delayed some key schemes here. So we are looking to them now to come to the party. You see, the great difficulty is this. I agree with Anthony that our economy needs this, and we need the additional water supplies. But it's a question about the municipal finances and our ability in the short period to put that capital up and to, in a way that doesn't push up the tariffs unduly in the short term. Now, the massive amount of money that's taken out of the Cape Town economy by the national government in terms of national taxes far more than is paid towards the municipality. We believe a reasonable amount of that needs to come back into our economy by the construction of the water supply systems. And as I agree that it is not just desalination. Water reuse is a big opportunity for us. And we are certainly looking into that as a significant contributor to our water supply going forward.
And Anthony, farmers have their own private dams. Could you tap into them? Could they be forced to give water over if need be? I mean, is that something that needs to be
That's what saved Cape Town last season. The fact that water was released from
and could that be better utilised going forward?
Well, once again, we have to understand that that comes at a price, because that we're now talking about lost agricultural production. So we're talking about loss of jobs once again. So there are no free lunches in this thing. We've reached the limit of our water. So however way we cut this cake, we've reached the limit of our water supply. So we have to think of water as an ultimate economic enabler, or the absence of water as the ultimate economic destroyer. So if we think of this new paradigm of abundance where water is treated as a flux, that's an infinitely renewable resource, we now restore confidence in the economy. We attract capital and technology, appropriate technology, not a silver bullet technology, appropriate technology for use across the economy, and this now becomes an economic enabler. The simple reality is that the fiscus right now can no longer pay for these things. We need approximately R1 trillion invested into our water infrastructure across the economy. It's about 800 million to R1 trillion. That's what we need. Now, the fiscus cannot afford that. So we're either going to continue to limp on like a wounded animal, or we're going to really get serious about it and say that water is an ultimate economic enabler, and we're going to look at these. There are three elements to the strategy. Number one, the recovery of water from waste. Number two, the desalination of seawater where appropriate. And number three, the conjunctive use of groundwater. So instead of storing water in dams where it's lost to evaporation under conditions of climate change, the surplus water from the desalination gets put into the aquifers. And for example, in Perth, the wastewater treatment work at a place called Beaniup currently recovers 120 megalitres of water per day from sewage, 120 million litres per day from sewage stored in the Leederville aquifer for 25 years. The Australians are smart.
All right, so clearly we need to smarten up. Ian Nelson, what sort of damage did the water shortage do to Cape Town and its reputation? I know Anthony's just touched on it, but I mean, and attracting investment there.
Well, certainly it set us back. I mean, let's not try and dodge that issue. The fact is that, for example, our tourism industry suffered quite severely. Our booming film industry also had a very serious blowback. And, you know, the agricultural industry is very important here in the Western Cape. It's a strong part of our economy, also agricultural processing, and obviously that was also affected by reduction in production. And we can go through a number of other sectors in the economy that were affected by this. It also, I think, hit us very strongly in the sense that as a city we have a strong reputation of having good service and good standard of service, and obviously what happened during this drought set back that view of our city. So we have to regain that confidence. We have to rebuild our water supply system and augment it in a way that is affordable and suitable going forward, so that all these potential booming sectors of our economy can benefit and build all the jobs that we want to be built.
Anthony, I suppose the one good thing that came out of it is that it's changed many South Africans' relationship to water, with water.
Well, we've had many crises before, and I'm not sure that it has changed. It changed our awareness in the very short term. The public has got a very, very short-term memory of these things. And it comes the rain and suddenly it's all gone and some other crisis being dealt with. I just want to say one thing, if I may, please, just to touch base on what Mr. Nielsen said. He's touched a very important issue there. The Municipal Financial Management Act is a critical element in the problem. It does not allow the municipality to enter into a contractual agreement long enough for them to contract for desalination. They can only enter the contract for 24 months as far as I'm aware. Just correct me if I'm wrong. But for a proper desalination contract, you need a 25 to 30 year window. So unless we sort those structural, legal, institutional problems out, we're not going to get it right.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Nkosana from Western Cape. Go ahead, Nkosana.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you. What's your question?
My question is based on the city right there. My question is there any alternative rather than the desalination? Because for me, I feel like it's very much expensive, especially for the residents of the Western Cape. I mean, tariffs are hiking and the working class is suffering because of the desalination. So basically, is there any alternative, perhaps?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And would you like to take that?
Well, I mean, I have said that. I mean, surface water is the cheapest, but we're running out of those options. And we're running out of cheap surface water options. So there's unfortunately that the public are going to have to understand the full cost of water supply. I think that's exacerbated right now because we are still in the drought situation. We're still under very restrictive water consumption use, and therefore the tariffs are elevated this time. We're hoping that the National Department will agree to a slight relaxation in our tariffs now that in terms of consumption, now that our dams are at 60%. But we can't decide that alone. That's together with all the other consumers in the catchment area. And if that is so, we'll be selling more water, and therefore we'll be able to move our tariffs onto a lower band. So this is the other difficulty that we're facing. It's very difficult in the drought scenario and the times during the drought when you're trying to get just to the income you need to operate the system, to also then get the funds that you need to expand the system. So we must ensure that we have a long-term view over time, building these also outside of our drought periods when money will be a little bit more available. I mean, just say that Anthony was slightly incorrect there. We can do long-term contracts if it goes beyond 3 years, but there is a long, difficult process that one needs to do that. And if you're in an emergency situation, that's very difficult to achieve. But when you are planning for the future, certainly we can put 25 and 30-year contracts into place.
And I should imagine, going back to what we were talking about, it's very hard to get people on board if they're feeling it in their pockets, right?
Well, that raises a very important question about what is cheap and what is expensive. And this, to me, it talks about poverty eradication. We have to eradicate poverty in this country. We just simply have to do it. But how do we eradicate poverty? By giving people free water and free houses? Or do we eradicate poverty by giving them access to decent jobs where they can own a house, where they can leverage capital from the financial institutions, and they can then afford to pay for the services that give them the good quality water? So that's a very important conversation we need to have. But at the moment, part of the problem is that we actually are unique in the world in that our tariff structure is so bizarre. Private individual users are charged higher than bulk water users. And what that then does is it disincentivizes the bulk users from doing better things with water. If you get a bulk user to just save 5 or 10% of their water, it's a major impact. Whereas for the same impact, you've got to have massive disruption of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people to achieve the same outcome.
And let's leave it there. A lot, it seems, needs to be fixed. Anthony Turton and Ian Neilson, thank you very much. Thank you. Still